Philly finally broke through. Obviously, Boston being uh, one of the premier teams of the season, they exceeded a lot of expectations because their best player, Jayson Tatum, was out for the majority of the year with an Achilles injury. But he returned, and it definitely boasted a lot of people's opinions of Boston and potentially winning a championship. But things just fell through the cracks yesterday, and a lot of that had to do with Tatum in the 25th hour coming out saying he wouldn't be able to play due to knee stiffness, and that definitely changed the trajectory of the game.
Yeah, amazing series. A gritty and gutsy 3-1 comeback for Philadelphia. Embiid, who's the subject of a lot of like critique. A gutsy performance, right? Digging it out, coming back from surgery a few weeks ago, right, and having it and really leading Philadelphia to this win. And as you said, Tatum being unable to play was unfortunate. As you know, Boston had like a really interesting year. We knew Tatum was out going to be out for a extended period of time. You wondered like they hurt around the playoffs. They got out to a slow start. Then they really got going. So I think the Jaylen Brown's ability to lead them due to him not being there, plus his return, I think kind of made many look at Boston with like refreshed eyes, like, wait, this could be something, right? If they were able to sustain and be this strong in his absence, once they add him, they should go far. And it's unfortunate for them that they ran into maybe the worst case scenario first round matchup with Philly, who's a 7th seed, but not a true 7th seed because they dealt with injuries and absence, not only Embiid but Paul George, right? So I think this is just like the sum of all fears for Boston, that they would exceed expectations, play so well, get a really top seed to finish 2, just to run into a team that shouldn't be a 7th seed. So sometimes that's how the ball rolls. That's how the cookie crumbles. And now we got Philly moving on to round 2 against the Knicks.
Now, when you think about this matchup, you think about the series and unpack it from game to game, it was very polarizing in some respects because the first game, obviously Philadelphia had to play their way into the playoffs to solidify 7. They dominated Orlando at home to win the play-in game, and they're going to go into Boston, who's been rested for a week, and Boston showed dominance in the way that Philadelphia wasn't quite ready for in the first game. They just blitzed them, right? But then in that second game, you see Maxey really take the bull by the horns and really get everything flowing. And VJ Edgecombe had a breakout game 2. In game 1, they dared him to shoot. He couldn't make any shots. In game 2, he was able to really find his rhythm, and that was the X factor that really got Philly over the top to complement what Maxey did, right? So when you steal a game on the road, even though Boston, in terms of point differential, is leaps and bounds ahead of Philly, it's 1-1. So Philly did their job at that point. Now, at this point, you're hearing rumblings of Joel Embiid potentially coming back. So now that raises some eyebrows to your point, what is this team going to look like when Embiid comes back? Because when he's back, they're 2 different teams. We've spoken about this at length about how they play much faster when he's not on the floor because it takes on Maxey's identity versus when Embiid's there, they slow down, they play through him, and you play more of a half-court game. In game 3, that was a nail-biter down to the end because both teams understood the severity of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever won that game potentially could have swung the series. And I believe that one was 108-100. It came down to the wire. Tyrese Maxey was amazing. Philly was playing from behind for most of the game, but they ended up taking the lead, but just couldn't get the lead that could solidify the game. They would be up by 1, be up by 3. Boston would come right back, hit a 3, which we're going to speak about that in terms of analytics and how that, in my opinion, really drowned the Celtics. I think their reliance on the 3 and the volume in which they take the 3s really sacrifice some quality games for them. And I think that's been an Achilles heel for them for many years, but particularly with this particular group, it definitely hurt them. So you have that game 3 that was close. So right now Boston's up 2-1, and now Embiid is back. I would like to get your opinion on Embiid's return, and then what did you think shifted from game 4 to game 5 through 7 with him? Because you mentioned how dominant he was, but what was the difference between game 4, in which he didn't play well, the team didn't play well, Boston blitzed them at home, it was just bad. What was the shift you saw that really opened it up for him and the Sixers?
I think Philly had confidence that they could beat Boston, right? I think they were able to get a game early, right? So they gave them confidence. And I think once Embiid came back, they gave them renewed confidence. They did go down 3-1, right? And Embiid did struggle. But I think great players don't need long to figure it out, right? There was some rust there, right? But he's a really talented, skilled big, and when he gets it right, he pours it on in bunches, right? He's someone who can score in a lot of different ways. He is one of the most skilled big men of all time. Definitely him and Joke are the most skilled two big men of the last, 15 or so years. Who had debuted in the last 15 or so years. So I think it don't take much to get him going, right? And I think when you factor in the fact that he was shaking off some rust, plus like the critique he's been through this year, also the idea that, like he said, I'm sick of losing to these dudes, right? Like it's been a while. I lost them a lot in my life. I think when you combine those three factors, I think that was really the catalyst that I was able to get Philly back into it, right? So he had a strong game. He had a strong
game 5.
Game 5 for sure, right? And then game 7, like he was just like on both ends of the floor, right? Like scoring points, hitting threes, quiet in the crowd, big time blocks at the rim, like the 9 round at the rim on dunk. So I think he was just like really focused. Let's get this done, right? We had the time to do this. The time is now. I done lost these do so much. If we're gonna do it, I got Maxey, who's a young gunner, right? Like amongst the 5 best point guards in the NBA, in my opinion, right? And I think that's probably the difference between Philly now and Philly in the past. They didn't have a guard who was a consensus killer throughout at his position, right? On the floor, right? So they had Simmons, not really a scorer, a go-to guy. They had Harden, an amazing player, one of the best ever, right? But someone who is known to not play his best when the lights shine the brightest, right?
Also to that point, I think the version of Harden that they got, he was Harden in name, but not Harden in that particular game. He was more of a playmaker at that point and at this junction in his career, versus anything other than Ben Simmons is an upgrade, but it isn't necessarily what Philly needed to like break through. They needed a Harden that could get 30 when necessary, 28. Right.
And Harden had some games. I think he had a 45. That's if I'm not mistaken, right? He had a 45, and he had a game winner, right? But
not to cut you off.
Sure.
That was a wasted year. Because as I mentioned, in terms of how Harden played at that point as a Sixer, to get a 45 from Harden at that point in his career,
they should have been with that.
You can't waste that.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. And that 2023 year was a big year.
And the fear with Harden is you worry as the series goes on and we need a big game, he might deliver, right? And while what you're saying is absolutely true about they got a reduced version of Harden, right? At all points in his career, we've seen that in big games. Unfortunately, he hasn't lived up to who he was most of the time for his team, right? So that plus the fact that he was at a different stage of his career than Bo right now. Maxey is the opposite of that, right? Maxey has been someone who has been really amazing in his brief player career, right? When we're at the Knicks a few years ago, right? And if Embiid doesn't get hurt, that series perhaps looks differently, right? So you finally have the culmination of Philly's youth growing up. Their big man who happened to come back and play basketball and be healthy at a really important time, and they're surrounded by a really good rookie and Paul George, who deserves credit for shooting lights out this series, right? So I think and they're extremely well coached, right? Nick Nurse is a coach with a proven track record. So I think all those things both went really well for Philly, and that's why they're moving on to round 2, and Philly and Boston is unfortunately going home.
Now, when we talk about Boston, so much has been predicated on the success of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
Mhm.
How will they coexist? How have they coexist? Especially as they develop together, and they've had tremendous success. They're winners. They actually are champions because they won the championship in 2024. You respect the durability of both in terms of how they've been able to perform together. But at the same time, they definitely have left a lot on the table.
A lot.
You can go back to 2017, 2018, 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23. There's a lot of years where they're in the Eastern Conference Finals and fall short, or they burn out. Now, during this entire run, they've played for three different coaches, right? And I think the turn to Joe Mazzulla, obviously off of Ime Udoka, has been a focus on 3-pointers at a rate that you'll take the 3 instead of the 2. Analytics says to do that. But there's been too many times where this Boston Celtics algorithm has relied on the 3 in a way to where it'll be a detriment to their performance. Now, there's times where they'll dominate, and there's times where you can tell they're taking too much. Now, losing Jayson Tatum in a 7th game of a series, it's not ideal. But to your point about how they performed without him for so long, you would think that they have an identity that they can lean on when he's not there. This is a team in their 4 losses this series. They shot 49 for 179 from 3. That's 26%. And when you look at a player like a Derek White took 26 shots yesterday, right? The majority of them are 3-pointers. Now, you're saying you want to get these shots up. You look at Payne Pritchard. He's also a 3-point shooter. He's a marksman. You got Sam Hauser. You got all these guys predicated on 3-pointers, but they don't have anything else, right? And when we talk about their personnel, right, they don't have anything that counteracts what they do when they're struggling from the outside. And I think Philadelphia abused that.
Yeah, and they should, right? Between Brown, Tatum, and Pritchard, right? You have guys who are able to create and get into the lane, right, and make something happen, right? So you kind of shake your head as to threes are amazing, right? It's the law of the land, especially in this version of the NBA. But when it's not going right, you got guys who can put their head down and try to make something happen. Why don't they do it, right? So it is this stubbornness to live by the 3 and definitely die by it. And unfortunately, we've seen year in and year out, they've chosen to die by the 3, where there is a more efficient or a more useful way to score the basketball.
Do you think that this particular loss affects or will change the trajectory of what this Celtics team is? Like, will there be change? Will there be drastic change in terms of Brown and Tatum together going forward? Because a Jaylen Brown season without Jayson Tatum definitely could influence how he believes he needs to play. That was definitely a conversation for many, many years. But Tatum has always been in the forefront. Tatum has always been the premier All-NBA player, the All-Star, the MVP candidate. And Jaylen Brown was looked at as support. Well, now he finally gets to go full bloom, and he's going to be a potential first-team All-NBA guy. He's an All-Star. He's a champion. He's somebody who's played big in big moments with Tatum there. Will he believe that he's a first option going forward, and that changes things?
I want to say that I want to give credit to these 2 really great players who put together the entire career, who we haven't heard this, despite the outside noise and rumblings, we haven't heard much friction between them in that regard, right? Yesterday, Brown said our best player didn't play. That was part of it, right? And both guys, they seem to be generally cool, and also seem to have an understanding that that we are really good together, right? So these are 2 really then they're older. They're not old players, right? They are seasoned, right? But they've been mature. 2 mature players, right? And I think that's helped them like stay together. In the time where we've seen players look for greener pastures, right? I think they probably learned from the Kyrie example, right? Who left something amazing, right, to chase like individual accolades and go to guy status in Boston and see him kind of blow up in his face. Then hear him kind of regret that, right? So who knows what happened? Things change by the week, by the month in the NBA, right? But I think right now, I think they're at bay, and I do think they look at this season as sort of anomaly, right? I think that they know they know they overachieve compared to what many expecting them to be. I mean, I think that they have it in mind that we had Tatum back, but we didn't have a full Jayson Tatum, right? I mean, he was hurt, right? So I'm not sure if there's much to hang your hat on. A first round exit for a team with championship aspirations is disappointing, but I think in what they were expected to be, and how they ended up losing, I'm not sure if they should feel the most disappointed about how this season ended.
But see, this is the thing, right? If you talk about how it ended, if they were to lose to Philly 4-1,
yeah,
I think to your point, you would be like, okay,
yeah,
you know, they definitely overachieved and they got to a point where they should be happy with what they did, right? Because this would be a gap year. You said anomaly, right? But to lose in the fashion that they did,
yeah,
I think that's where the concern is, because this is a mirror that we've seen before in
yeah.
terms of how they're losing, in terms of execution, right? To be up 3-1, to have big leads and blow. If you go back to the Knicks series, they were down 3-1, or they were gonna go down 3-1 when Tatum went down. In that series, they had multiple 20-point leads, and the Knicks walked them down at home, right? So you're looking at a team that's not defending home court the same way, or they get big leads and they blow it. This particular series, they punched Philly in Boston, they punched Philly in Philadelphia, but at the same time, they would get up 15-14, Philly would walk them down. You know, you blow 3 home games in Boston, right? So these are things where it's like you're happy with what you saw your team do without Tatum, but you're also like, we're not really learning from, you know, our mistakes and our flaws. We still fall into that trap. And I think even though they are champions, in totality over the last, let's say, 6-7 years, they kind of fall into those same traps. And I think that's the part where it's not necessarily sustainable for them to be constant or consistent championship contenders.
Yeah, it's been tough. Our teams okay with just having their name in the mix, right? And not like getting it done. Now they did get it done, right? And they got it done two seasons ago. So that's also like really recent. But yeah, the way they've lost is a little alarming. But I think they can particularly point to this year as there are a lot of things outside their control, right? They couldn't control Tatum's health, and they couldn't control Embiid coming back, right? So I think despite the culmination of their losses and seeming like they keep faltering, right? I think this year was a year in which like there was a lot out of their hands that they couldn't really control. And I think at least for the near future, they can be content with that. I think everybody should look to get better, right? OKC and the Spurs probably the 2 best teams that are probably that should be content, right? I think anyone can look to improve, but I don't know if this is exactly panic time or blow up time for a team like Boston, right? Because I think they lost this year in a way that you just can't account for, right? You hope Tatum will be healthy, and if Embiid has history of injuries, has surgery a few weeks ago, you probably don't bank on him coming back and dominating, right? So like you can't put your hands up.